Great. So moving on swiftly forward, we go to the main details of how did we get to that process? What did we do to get us to the point where we were able to rank the winners? And what were some of the issues that we found out, some of the questions that you have raised, and then finally the outcomes of that process? And to help us do that, we have two people that will take two parts of that process. One is Maurice Gachuhi, who is an audit manager at KPMG. And then once Maurice is done, he will be joined on stage or followed thereafter by Sheil Jill. Sheil is the head of transaction and restructuring at KPMG in East Africa. So let's invite Maurice to just give us that walkthrough and tell us about how you did on Top 100. Let's welcome Maurice.
Thank you, Robert. Good evening, guests, ladies. Good morning, guests, ladies and gentlemen. Mine is very simple today, actually, and it's basically to demystify the whole process of ranking and what we guys go through at KPMG. I will try to explain to you what we look for, what we look out for, what we go through, what we expect from participants, and how we go about finalizing and ranking the process. I'll start off by just looking at the context. I'll look and take you through the introduction, the points to note, the process reviews, the challenges and the feedback, and then I think later after Sheil has made her presentation, we'll have a Q&A session. Introduction, why do we do Top 100? One, we do Top 100 to identify the fastest growing companies, and when I get to the ratios, I'll be able to show you how we identify that. So we are looking for the fastest growing companies that are profitable. Profitable is very key, and financially stable. We're also trying to recognize the top 100 amongst the companies that take part. Remember, this is a self-nominating process, so we look forward to you nominating yourself to this process, and not per se going out in more or less of a scientific research to bring you on board. We also try to identify and recognize top performance in the various industries. So once we're done with the ranking, and I'll get to that point, we then go ahead and allocate you into the various sectors which you represent. Again, this gives us the qualitative factors on what sectors are growing, how they're growing, etc. The other item is we also try to identify sectors where Kenyan companies are growing in competitiveness. Again, this is identified through the ratios that we do and also through the qualitative processes or qualitative factors that we take up, both from the financial questionnaires that you guys fill and also the general questionnaires that you also fill as part of this process. One thing I want to take you through is what we do not do. So as we say, Top 100 survey is a self-nominating process. So what we do, we rely on you as management to make sure that you review your financials, make sure they are audited, make sure that you meet the various criteria that are then set out for participation, and then make sure that your auditors then review the processes and are both happy with your numbers and your ratios, which are then sent to us. So as KPMG, during the verification process, we do not audit or verify the ratios. So what we do, we obtain the ratios as reviewed and as computed by yourself and as certified by your auditors. And remember, we also certify ourselves that your auditors are registered with ISPAC, and that for some of them, we do look at them in case there are any items, just to make sure that they are foolproof. We also do not make any representation as to the accuracy of figures submitted to us, because that's your responsibility and your auditors. Remember, that thing that we don't do, we don't reward companies that lead in job creation. However, there's a relationship between fast-growing companies and job creation. And this is of importance to us. And I think once Sheil comes through, you'll be able to appreciate the qualitative factors that then come out of that particular aspect. The other thing is that we assess and reward, we do not assess and reward non-qualitative factors like staff and job satisfaction, customer satisfaction, timeliness of payments. However, all these qualitative factors have a way of feeding into the various ratios that we get from you. The reason why we don't do this is we try as much as possible to stick to the numbers and the ratios. Again, they say numbers don't lie. So we try to eliminate the subjectivities that are involved by making sure that we remain objective, stick to the numbers. And again, one way or another, all these qualitative factors show them or feed into the numbers and the ratios anyway. So just to reiterate, the survey participants must own the process. And one of the things that we do is that when you're filling up that questionnaire, when Sinovate, who's a main research partner, comes to you, they make sure that the FQ is properly filled up, and they give you guidelines on how to go about it. So we also require that once you're happy and you've come up with the ratios and you've input them in the FQ, you sign them off. No FQs will be accepted unless signed by either the CEO or CFO. That's one of the, again, making sure that ownership retains from you. The FQ must be accompanied by an auditor confirmation. I know in the past we've always told you, yes, submit the FQs to us first, and then as you follow up with your auditor to confirm with us. This is very important because we try as much as possible to make sure the ratios and the numbers that are coming through to us are of integrity and are foolproof. So that, this is a very critical process to us where we make sure that your auditors actually review and sign off the ratios that you send to us. We also insist that as management, you have to make sure that you fully understand the terms and conditions of participating and making sure that you are fully aware of what is required and that you've met the criteria. Just a snapshot of the summary of how we go about the process. There was the call to entry, which is usually the first thing. There's a lot of things that go behind the scenes. But I think for us, the first point of when we initiate our process is when we call for entry. I think this time around it happened around March. And this goes through the adverts where one of our partners, Nation Media Group, they go ahead to put up full-page adverts. These adverts stipulate what we require you to do, and also include a part of people who participated in the past and how their lives have been transformed and how they've grown by virtue of participation. Then we go ahead as KPMG and train the people who participate in the data collection. And in this case, there will be those that work for the research company, Sinovate. So we do a thorough training on them in terms of both etiquette and also in terms of how to assist you in making sure that whatever data that is then collected by us is foolproof. Then after that, you guys then fill in the questionnaires, both FQs and the general questionnaires, and then pass that information to Sinovate. Sinovate then go through a process of verifying that data for inconsistencies, making sure that we have that is complete. And then after that, they send the data to us. Now, once that is sent to me, I assemble a team, of course, a KPMG, and we come up with various procedures that we then go to verify and make sure that whatever data is being given to us is foolproof, it's consistent, it makes sense. If you're a repeat participant, we also look at prior year, how you are performing, how then that feeds into the current years, just to make sure that the numbers are foolproof. And I'll explain in a bit how we go about that. Then after that, we do the data verification, the eliminations, then the final ranking, the final reviews and sign-offs, and communication of results. Data verification. As I said, the FQ is basically the information, gives us all the information that we need to be able to rank you and to be able to come up with the various analyses that we do here. So once we obtain the master data, we verify that to the financial questionnaires, which has been filled by yourself. Then we follow up with the auditor confirmation to make sure that your auditor has actually confirmed that they are happy with the numbers that have come through. The initial ranking, we do an initial ranking just to appreciate how people are doing. Then after that, we then start looking more keenly at the numbers, asking ourselves, trying to eliminate those that don't fit the appropriate criteria or that criteria that has been set out. The elimination process is based on a couple of items which are communicated to you. One of them is participants with any incomplete or inconsistent FQs. Incomplete will be one that are missing vital ratios or vital numbers of key details that would provide undue advantage to any other participants. Then it would also be FQs that appear inconsistent. I mean, when I look at the ratios, I'll take you through what we look at. If your ratios appear a bit off or they don't make sense given either what you've included in your ratios or what you had presented prior, then at that time we flag you off. And where we don't get responses timely in terms of rectifying that, then of course you're eliminated. If your auditor confirmation has not come through, then that is, again, we can't then vouch to the accuracy, to the integrity of your numbers. And at that point, then we have no choice but to eliminate you. However, that said, we do quite a bit of follow-up. We have various processes to make sure that for those who have not provided the auditor confirmations, that those come through. Now, the other criteria is for those with, of course, revenues below 70 million in any of the years, we then eliminate you. Participants with less than 3 financial periods. Remember, it's very key. It's a 3-year period. For this one, if you have a 2-year period, then you will have undue advantage against the others. And we try to keep it as objective and as representative as possible. The other one is an average turnover for the last 3 years was in decline. Then, of course, here we are trying to look out and award the fastest growing companies. So if your revenues, again, are declining, then we try to weight that and eliminate you on that basis. Then if you have a negative return on average equity in 2012, that is you had a loss in 2012, then again, you don't fit that profile that you're trying to look at. And so what we do, we then also eliminate you on that basis. If you have negative 3-year return on average equity, that's again a key ratio. Then the last one is if you're a participant over 1 billion and meet the criteria, then ideally you should be graduating to the Club 101. So at this point, we eliminate you from that and put you into now to be reviewed against for those qualifying or graduating to Club 101. The current year, I think we now have 5. So in terms of the final rankings, what ratios do we look for? The key ones, we have 3 key ratios that we lay a lot of emphasis on. The first one is average revenue growth in turnover for the last 3 years. Remember, my first slide, we talked about, we're trying to reward the fastest growing companies that are financially stable in terms of liquidity, etc. So average revenue growth is very key. So that's one of the ratios that is used for ranking. The second one is return on average equity. This is a return to investors or to the investors in that business. This is very key for us because then it shows how much or how long they take to recoup their investments and how much they're making in terms of their bottom line. That then feeds into their reserves. The other one is a current ratio. Current ratio is in terms of, is a very key ratio in terms of liquidity, and it gives us a very good indicator of how you're managing both your working capital and your liquidity requirements. So this fits into the profile of a top 100 participant who is to be highly ranked within the top 100. Now, the key ratios. What are the key ratios we look out for? I've already mentioned the first 3, which measure the key ones, of course, the growth, the return to shareholders, and liquidity and financial stability. However, if you look at the FQ, we normally have 10 ratios. And most of you will ask, why then do we why do we require 10 ratios? Well, there are other ratios that are quite key to us. The number of days sales in debtors. It shows how you're managing your working capital, right? So it's very key for us to know, yes, you're making all these sales, just what was saying. You're making all these sales, but how are you then managing your liquidity or working capital requirements? Is everything in debt? Are you collecting? Do you have cash profits? So that's very key. So what happens in most situations, you'll see that once we rank or we do our initial ranking, you'll see that most of them, some of them will tie based on the 3 ratios. So what we do, we then look for tiebreakers. Tiebreakers are those that then distinguish you further from those that, just in case you're tying on the initial 3. So the other ratios, the tie-break ratio is usually the number of days in sales. And then also we then look at the other ones, return on weighted average equity, quick ratio, which again is liquidity based on the current ratio. The only thing that we exclude there is inventory. And then retention ratio, which is how growth is funded. Now, part of the issues we identified this year are probably worth noting is that there were some challenges in calculating some of these ratios where, for example, retention ratio in some cases appear to be 100, over 100 in the FQs, which basically saying you're distributing more than you actually made in the current year. So what we did in some of these things, we then come back to you and ask you to re-verify them. The last one is interest cover ratio, which is basically shows more of debt servicing and how you go about doing this. So these are very key ratios for us. They're used for tie breaks, and we also give a picture of an overall picture of how that business is doing. So if you're ranking top 100, it's more or less a holistic view of how your performance was. Some of the challenges in closing, some of the challenges that we faced this year, most of them were delays in receipt of FQs. The call to entry came around May. And I remember it took quite a bit, even after the road shows and all. We took quite a long time before we got some of the FQs sent back to us, where people then indicated intention to participate, but delayed quite a bit. What that does is that it brings us down to the wire in terms of trying to be able to finish within time, and also in case there are any issues with the FQs, it reduces our turnaround time or feedback time. So going forward, these are areas that we're looking forward to getting even views from yourself in how best we can then manage this process to make sure that the receipt of FQs is done on a timely basis. Delays in receipt of auditor confirmations. Most of the participants, I think in terms of eliminations, this was the highest. We had quite a number of auditors confirmation that didn't come through. And of course, there were various reasons. Either the audit was still ongoing, it was not complete, or the auditors were charging something and some participants were not willing to go ahead with that. So there were challenges in that front. So we tried our best to push and delay right to the wire. But for those that didn't come through, then we had to eliminate. And that is something that we're trying to see how we can do going forward. And suggestions are abound in terms of if at all we can get then the audited accounts, probably that would be a much better way. But again, any changes will be communicated. There were delayed responses and inquiries on inconsistencies and missing data. Again, if your FQs came late, it became a challenge getting back to you in terms of where issues were identified. Getting back to you on those specific ones was a key challenge for us. The last thing is the general addresses. What we noted is that in most FQs, most companies were using general email addresses and also general lines. So when we had challenges and we want to get a quick turnaround in responses, and on these inconsistencies or auditor confirmations, it was a nightmare because everything, I mean, the general inboxes for emails, somehow the turnaround in response time was very slow. For most of the numbers indicated there were not being picked. So it was quite frustrating. And again, we ended up eliminating quite a number of participants based on that. So going forward, I think the takeaway on these is to make sure that we are able, we just include the key contact person. If it's the finance director, if it's the CEO, you can put in your direct lines there, and we should be able to get back to you, and at that point, then you can be able to participate without any challenges. So for me, as I wind down on my presentation, I think for me, it's the key takeaways is that your participation is highly appreciated. Your responsibility as management is very paramount for us and for this process. We undergo a very credible and a very robust process with reviews going all the way to the top. We can't present these until Josephat has signed off and is happy with the process. And before he does that, we really have to work for that. For the participants, for those who participated this year, didn't make it, please go ahead, participate next year. We have a database that we're accumulating going forward, and we hopefully that you will be participating, and if you didn't make it this year, try to make it next year. If you didn't make it in the first year, you had below 70, plan on growing your revenues, plan on working on your issues. I've explained what we require. Feel free to reach out to us, and we should be able to get back to you. In terms of how we can make the process better, feel free to reach out to us. In terms of the challenges you guys are facing, feel free to reach out to myself and to Robert, and you'll be able to get back to you and, of course, improve the process. Now, without further ado, this morning, I will now go ahead and invite Shil, who is our director in our transactions and restructuring business, and should be able to take you through the remaining part. And then after that, we will have an a Q&A. Thank you. Thank you very much for listening to me.